All right, we are live. And on today's episode, I interview a mentor, a businesswoman, a senior yoga teacher who's been teaching yoga since 1980 after first taking her first class in 1975. She's also the founder of the Yoga Studios of Calgary and the Yoga Studio College of Canada, through which she's trained over 1,000 yoga teachers who spread out all across Canada, teaching successfully and adding to the quality of people's lives. Welcome to the Winner Circle, Valery Petrich.
Thank you very much, Derek.
It's really nice to talk with you. I have your book here in the background, which I was really excited to have been reading, where you profile the first yogis, the pioneers of the yoga teachers in Canada, and it's just
Right.
really inspiring to read.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, So, as I was mentioning before this call, the goal of these conversations is really to uplift, inspire, and empower everyone tuning in just to move forward with greater faith and belief in themselves on their personal hero's journey. So, over this next 1 hour, we have the opportunity to explore yours.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you.
These tend to be really positive conversations, and this first question sets us up as such. There's lots of going on in the external world, but this is not what this is about. We're focused here on you, Valery. So, what do you love about your personal world right now?
For me, it's always about the opportunity to serve, and I find that the yoga skills, techniques, and practice and the benefits it gives people is an ideal opportunity to serve. If you want to make a difference in people's lives, if you want to help people who are experiencing anxiety, depression, now post-traumatic stress disorder, people affected by the war, which is pretty much everybody right now, yoga is an ideal pathway to do that, to be in service. I think at the end of the day, the ultimate goal of all yoga, other than self-transformation, is the opportunity to serve. One of my many teachers who was inspiring was Ram Dass. He started a foundation called SIVA, which is to serve, hooked up with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, plus many other accomplishments that he did. And so if you're talking about in my life right now, today, I'm deeply impacted by the Ukraine war. I'm actually going to be giving a teacher training in Poland and Ukraine in a few short weeks with the donations going to the Ukrainian cause. So today, that's what's impacting me. And it's not just me. We're all impacted. And some of the yoga people that have risen to the occasion from UK and Canada and the States to go serve with yoga trainings in Ukraine is very impressive and very needed. So I think that as ambassadors of yoga, we rise to the occasion and we see that this is what's needed and go to places where we can help and make a difference with that. Those who have been on the path a long, long time, like myself, we're here for a reason. It's because yoga works. And when you're committed to practice and you get the benefits of it, why stop? You just keep going. So it's very fulfilling on so many levels. So today, if you were to ask me today how it's impacting me, servicing the people that are not good with unpredictability. We're in an unpredictable world. There's no certainty. There's economic upheaval. Doesn't seem to be anybody sane at the helm, globally speaking. And so yoga is needed as a practice to keep people centered and focused and dealing with the day-to-day stuff that comes at them. So I just continue to do what I've always done, is try to inspire teachers to keep practicing, to take it seriously, to not dabble in it and then go on to the next, flavor of the month, but to stick with the tried and true, which is the classical hatha yoga practice. The meditation, most important is the meditation. People tend to miss that part. And share it with others when they have the opportunity. And there's lots of opportunity in your neighborhood, in your church, in your fitness club, with your family, different family member and friends. So there's when you're listening and paying attention, there's all kinds of opportunity to share yoga and teach people how to do it, and teach people that it's a daily practice. And if you can't do a daily practice, do it once or twice a week until such time as it takes life of its own and becomes a daily practice. and to be the salesman. I always said you don't have to sell yoga, but you have to nudge people and keep reminding them of why it's such a beneficial practice for Westerners, right? Not just the physical byproducts, but the mental grounding and better clarification and concentration and all of those things. So I think in the teachers that I've trained over 25 years, they're doing wonderful things out there. They're so innovative, so creative in what they've come up with to take yoga to the Western marketplace. And that will continue to evolve and show itself. And it's really exciting to see that taken forward, because we're in third generation of yoga in Canada now, coming into the 4 generations of yoga. And it didn't really start to have fruition until the late 90s. As I said in my book, it really took off in the late 90s because we had to go through the aerobic craze first and a lot of the other things before people were really paying attention to yoga.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have so many questions just from that response alone, but let's just start with yoga works. When you said that, that's what I was thinking, and that's what you know as well. But why does yoga work? In your opinion, why does yoga work?
Because just like Patanjali said, the mind field is so full of vrittas and disturbances, given birth by the ego, settling into just the middle level of consciousness, and that's the layer of reality that we live in. So to interrupt those thoughts, you've got to move into stillness. To move into stillness, you have to inhabit your body. To inhabit your body, you have to be moving into stillness for more than just 5 seconds and paying attention to what's happening now. So when people get addicted to postures, and they will if they find the right yoga teacher, they will start to practice the poses as a meditation, as a prayer. It's like B.K.S. Iyengar said, the body is the temple of the spirit, and the asanas were his prayer. And that's the way he did his practice in the way that I observed him when I studied with him, and that's the way he taught people to practice. So when you show up for practice, that meditative quality, it then starts to take you down a path of, there's more and more quiet glimpses, nanoseconds at first, and then longer minutes, where the superconscious, the samadhi, and all of the other bliss consciousness states present themselves. And it's very fleeting at first, but when you stick with it and you cultivate it in your practice, it's very seductive and you want more. And that's when people are on the path. So that when you meet people like me who have been on the path this long, it's because we have discovered it's true what Patanjali promises. Mm-hmm. And it keeps you engaged and it keeps you curious to see what the glimpses between the thoughts will present. Mm-hmm. So that's the practice. It's a consciousness practice.
Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful one that has helped me so much on my personal path. One concern I have is where yoga is headed. You're seeing it optimistically, but I'm seeing a lot of yoga being offered just really focusing on that one branch of the 8th limb path, and that is the asana, not teaching the philosophy of yoga, not the sutras, not the yamas, the niyamas, and all the other limbs.
It's because they're not ready. The asanas serve a purpose. They condition the body to stop the constant need for gratification of the physical body. So it might be asanas for years before you can have some kind of discipline over that. I mean, there's a reason it comes in the stages that it does on the Ashtanga 8 limbs of yoga. And I always say yoga without asana, without meditation, is like apple pie without the ice cream. You're really getting cheated out of the good stuff if you don't carry through and do the meditation. But it happens in time. For example, I've trained almost 1,200 teachers. There's not a large percentage, in fact, it's a very small percentage of those teachers who have a committed meditation practice. What happens is, it's alarming. It's a discipline. It's you're born with a calling. You have an exploratory nature. You read the scriptures and they beckon to you. And if you don't have that, it's just another way to keep fit, and you work it in with all of your other fitness regimes, practices, and you leave it at that. I find those teachers tend to get bored and they go on to something else. But out of the certain percentage of the teachers that train, the cream always rises to the top. They delve deeper. They get more committed to the actuality of yoga, which is the full 8 limbs. And they take it forward. And those are the teachers that you want to seek out. Asana is the gateway for the Western practitioner. Asana is the introductory level that people come to yoga from.
Yes.
And often through trauma, hardship, like I look at your journey and I'm so inspired by you and in awe of you, because I think you're one of the people that looked at the trauma as being the gift. And when you have that kind of maturity from practice, that you can see the gift in the disability, in the trauma, in the adversity, in the life event that dealt you a tough one, you dealt you the rough deck of cards, you extract, because now you have to practice. Now your life is precious. Now returning to health and recovery is the ultimate. And you hang on to that and you pursue that as your priority in your day-to-day life. All of your values just got rearranged and shuffled in a very positive way.
Yeah.
So those are the committed people to look for when you're looking for inspiration on going down the path.
Thank you for that. And yoga helped me see that. It helped me see what cards lay in front of me, and the cards that lay in front of me were the cards that lay in front of me. So in the present moment, I can move forward with those cards positively, or I could use them to pull me back. And it's one or the other. And it's not huge steps, it's just small progress forward, and just recognizing that as the win.
Yes, and even Ram Dass, great teacher that he was for so many of us back in the 80s and 90s, Ram Dass, he was writing one of his more recent books. He had a stroke halfway through the book, and he said, I was stroked by grace. I was stroked by grace that I had this event happen to me. He returned and finished the other half of the book, and it was fabulous. He wrote Be Here Now in the 70s, and his latest book is still here. Of course, we lost him a couple of years ago. But stroked by grace means that we are humbled by whatever circumstance we find ourselves in that will bring us out of the ego and closer to the God of our understanding, which is very much what Patanjali teaches us about in the Yoga Sutras.
Yeah, no, I'm very pleased to hear you talk about Ram Dass. I wasn't aware that you are a fan, admirer of him. I'm actually wearing a Ram Dass shirt.
I love it.
And this hoodie
Great.
is Be Here Now, his first
Be
book.
Here Now? Oh, wow. Yeah, Be Here Now and Still Here.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
that's the cover of the book. Yes, very much so.
his very first book, yeah.
Oh, cool.
And so
very
he's
cool.
he's one of my favorite teachers, even though
Yes.
I've never met him personally. He walks with me in spirit and with his book and just in his audio recordings, his films. And
He lives on.
He lives on, and that's, I think, a power that we all have, is we can live on by the impact we have on those around us.
Yes. And that's why what we choose to do in our lives is very important. Do we want to leave an imprint that's positive? Do we want to be mentors and teachers and leave that behind? And the more that you meditate and practice, the more important it is that I-thou relationship that Father Joe Pereira talks about, for example, is that it's as important for somebody else to have success and enrichment than it is for me. And it affects your choices. You talk about in your podcast people making choices and the ability to make different choices when they're practicing yoga. And that's so true.
Yeah, and like these gems are in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Like Yoga Sutra 133 is one of my favorite sutras right now, and those are the 4 attitudes to cultivate a clear, calm mind. And you just talked about the virtuous. Like when people are succeeding, doing well in the life, like the attitude we are to approach them with is like a joy, a celebration, and be happy for those people. So
Yes.
it's incredible that all these knowings have been inscribed by Patanjali and as 196 sutras, and it's like my
That's
mission to help share and spread these to people and to help educate that yoga, while it can be a workout, it is far more than that. It's truly the opportunity to work in and to bring awareness to our true nature.
Yeah, and it's difficult for the Westerner. You go to India, there's not a lot of distractions.
Mm,
It's a simple life. You dress simply, you eat simply, you inhabit the earth more simply. It's easy to have a spiritual practice in India, in places like India, in monasteries and ashrams and what have you. It's very difficult in Western society because we have more affluence, we have more distractions, we have shopping centers, we have movie theaters, we have Netflix, we have all these things calling to bombard our senses. So to be able to say no, and again referring to one of the things you talk about, making choices that say, no, I'm choosing stillness, I'm choosing silence, I'm choosing to go into my mat, I'm choosing to renounce something, and and to look at that as being having more value, shall we say?
mhm,
It has more value than just consuming more and doing more.
mhm. So tell me, Valerie, how did that decision to choose yoga began in your life? You first practiced in 1975. Let's hit
Ah,
the rewind. Let's
I
hit
was
the
a
rewind button.
smoker. I was a heavy smoker. I was just coming out of eating disorders. I was 21 years old. Oh, I think I gave my age away there. Um, and my body was recovering from that. And I saw an ad in the Edmonton Journal in 1975 with Friedel Kitab. I forget what the ad said, but promising something about, it wasn't even fitness. I think it was peace of mind or something like that. Went to my first yoga class, click.
Hmm.
I came home. I felt like I'd come home. And everything resonated for me, and I stuck with her. Swami Radha's tape was playing at the end as she was chanting. And I just felt like it was something that I had longed for, and it was familiar to me, and I wanted more of it. And that was from that day on, I was hooked on yoga, stayed with Friedel Kitab, and eventually made my way to India to study with B.K.S. Iyengar. But I had a lot of American teachers support me. There wasn't much happening with yoga in Alberta. You had to go elsewhere. You had to get on an airplane to find any substantial teachings. And so I called them my American sisters. Some of them have passed away already, who took me under their wing and taught me a lot of things about practice and wisdom and knowledge and who to connect with and that kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm. So that was the beginning, and along the path, you became certified by B.K.S. Iyengar, the Himalayan Tradition Initiate, and Psycho-Synthetic Certified. So,
Yeah, yeah.
can you like kind of
Wow.
how did you lead? How did you get into all those?
Psychosynthesis is not that well known. It has some inner child work aspect attached to it, but it's also learning how to activate the will as a strong resource. When you talk about teaching and mentoring people to make better choices in their life, you're activating the will. So the will is a very strong reservoir within us that we can tap into. I am willing to do this. Gives it a kind of push forward to make it happen, or I'm not willing to do that, helps us set up parameters around our choices and actions. So that's psychosynthesis. The Himalayan tradition that I committed to was very, very long down the path of my practice. I didn't commit to any lineage. I don't think I understood it enough. I was a bit of a dilettante. But eventually, after about 20 years, I did make a commitment to one lineage, and that was the Himalayan. And Pandit Dabral is my teacher to this day. I was wary and skeptical about making a commitment to a guru up until then, having been in some ashrams and saw the things that were going on. And BKS I've always done light on yoga. Ever since the late 70s, I've studied and practiced many other traditions, Ashtanga, Shivananda, you name it, I've explored them all, but I always came back to the Iyengar style. So he was my first teacher, and I studied with him twice in India. And I have to say, as I've gotten older, I appreciate more and more the gift that he gave me and how selfless he was in taking unknown. He didn't really know me from Adam, And I wrote to him and said, can I come? And he said, yeah, you can come in 9 months, send me $125 US. And I did. And I was with him for 3 months every day in the classroom. So I think that I didn't really, as a young girl, understand the gift he was giving me. I had no idea I was going to open a studio or do any of those things. It came later. But I can honestly say now I am in deeper gratitude at this stage of my life than ever. I think it's important to always honor your first teacher for every little gem that they give you, and not to take that for granted. So B.K.S. Iyengar, I have huge gratitude to. He was a humanitarian. He never turned anybody away.
Would that be the greatest gem he taught you?
There were so many lessons that BKS taught me, more than we can go into in this podcast. I think what he taught me, definitely that's a big one, because I saw people arrive there just out of the blue. I think what he taught me is that determination. He was a very determined individual, and he was very fidgety and restless. So to watch him do his practice every day, he was teaching us stillness, but he wasn't still. He couldn't be still. And it was that restlessness and that perfectionism and that fidgetiness that he had that kept him looking deeper into asana with his inquisitive mind and accomplishing what he did in the legacy of work that he left us. So that was part and parcel of who the man was. That was an interesting process to observe in him. And I think that if I was to say one thing, the gift from him was perseverance. Yeah. Which is a good attribute to have.
Yeah. Where in your life, Valerie, have you had to use that attribute of perseverance? Like, what has been a big challenge you've had to overcome on your personal journey that perseverance was one of the key tools that you used?
Well, I've been a businesswoman for many, many years, almost 50 years. So being a businesswoman as a young girl in a man's world, I had to have perseverance. I had to, through different family challenges, have perseverance. The same as my perseverances have been no different than anybody else's. Whether it's health, finances, health, relationships, we're all in the same game together. We all have the same challenges. They just have a different storyline attached to them. What I did find was that this quest for something more that yoga kept beckoning to me gave me enough to be able to stand back and look at this all as just a play, like in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is inviting Arjuna to say, you really believe that this is real life? This is just a role you're playing temporarily. And yoga helps you stand back and have a bit of sense of humor about it, gives you a different lens to look at it through. And so perseverance comes easily, more acceptance of things, so.
Thanks for sharing that. How about some other teachers who've really influenced you on your path? You mentioned Ram Dass, Father Joe. Maybe you
Yes,
could
Father
speak on.
Joe's been a friend and mentor for 25 years. I met him in India in 1983 initially. Ram Dass, because, he was one of the first back in the 60s, and he was, it took him a long time to get him his due acknowledgement because he was always on the fringe. Other teachers, first and foremost for me is Rama Vernon, who really got the ball rolling for yoga in North America, out of San Francisco, the birthplace of yoga in America, by how she conducted her life and how selfless she was. She was a great mentor for me. She did peace shuttles to Russia, I don't know how many times, 30 times. And she took people by the hand and guided them to the resources that she thought they needed. And I try to do that in my life. I might not have the answer for you, but I know that somebody that does. And so I network that way and get people together that way. There's probably too many to mention. I hugely admire Judith Lassiter. She's written 10 books, and she took Iyengar's restorative yoga and made it practically a household practice in North America. That was Judith that did that. She's 78 now, and she's devoted her whole life to that. Closer to home in the Canadian scene, I love what Ryan Lear is doing with One Yoga. He's so joyful and fun. And everybody in my book, the 60 profiles in my book, I chose them because they were the first in something. Not because they were a pioneer, there was a few pioneers out there, but they made a contribution that they were the first in. That was the criteria for being in my book. So they were the first to start a provincial association, or they were the first to open a studio, the first to have a TV series, Karine Zebroff, here in our backyard. And I got interested in what brought them to Canada, because most of them were immigrants, and why yoga, and where did they bring it from, and what was their personal heroism about. And I devour biographies because they reveal so much about the person. When you dig deep enough with anybody in conversation or otherwise, they all have heroism of some kind. And so when I started this interview process, mostly out of curiosity, I found these incredible stories. They're mostly German and East Indian pioneers in Canada. And they came from war-torn backgrounds and the Second World War. And Friedel Kitab remembers meeting Hitler when she was a young girl. I wanted to tape it, so I taped all of these things for when I'm gone, and other people can take it forward, possibly do a documentary. Maybe that's you that's going to do that. So the people in the book, not all of them, some of them I found like a treasure hunt, like the one in the Guinness Book of Records. I didn't know about her until I went digging. But many of them I already knew, and I wanted to have their story before they left, before they passed on.
Mm-hmm. So out of all these 60 individuals you profiled in your book, what would you say the common thread that tied them all together? Was there one commonality that
they
all
were
had?
seekers. They were seekers and trailblazers, and they were interested, even though nobody else was interested in yoga. They were teaching in church basements, and throw a couple of dollars in the basket back then is what you did. You didn't charge for teaching yoga. It gave them a peace of mind that they wanted to share with others. So there's a selflessness in these people. There is seeking a spiritual experience, if you will, feeling like, I call it being tapped on the shoulder, like you feel somebody's tapping you on the shoulder and you want to respond to it, but to respond to it you need to be quiet and listen and let intuition come up. And I found that was a common element in a lot of these people that I interviewed. They weren't out for money. They weren't out for fame. They were out because yoga was the missing piece in their life that made them feel more whole and complete and healthy. And they had a desire to share it. It's as simple as that.
Yes, thanks for that reflection. It's something that I also noticed reading your book. And the commonality I found amongst them was they all pursued their must. And I define that must as that call in our heart to serve, our true calling. In today's world, a lot of people are stuck at that crossroads of should and must. And the shoulds are the things you've taught by your parents, society, school, the media, versus the must is that like that longing, that knowing, that creative, that truth in you. And not everyone has the courage to employ their will to step on that unknown path because of things such as fear.
Yes.
What have you learned about that
Conformity.
crossroads?
Well, Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. And I'm a high school dropout who became a successful businesswoman because I was searching. And I didn't get any support for that journey, but it was the right one for me. I think the advice I would give to people is that if you learn how to meditate and be quiet and get rid of all of the noise of the shoulds, there is a very clear path, if you trust it, to go forward.
I believe that. And another one of my favorite yoga philosophies, my favorite yama at the moment is Ishvara Pranidhana, and that's humble surrender to a divine power above me, guiding me, supporting me on my path. And that has helped me on my journey immensely. What does that niyama mean to you, Ishvara Pranidhana?
Well, you're talking about a very powerful step here. The surrender is surrendering from all of the noise and agenda of the ego That's very hard to do. That takes practice and it takes time. Most people aren't willing to put the time and patience into it. When you stop, Chitta Vritta Naroda, Patanjali says, when you stop the disturbances of the mind, wisdom and intuition will rise. And that is what you should follow. But you have to get rid of the noise and the clutter in order to hear it and to trust it. And it's a surrender. Surrender to my higher power. I will be okay. I will be safe. I will make the right choices. One of my affirmations every day is, I always make the best choices. 3 weeks from now, it might not seem like it was the best choice, but at the time with the information I had, it was the best choice, right? You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, and it's interesting. But maybe in 6 weeks, that choice that seems wrong today was to your betterment.
Yeah, like the Dalai Lama says, sometimes not getting what you want is a stroke of luck.
Yeah, you just can't see it at the moment.
At the moment, yeah. So surrender to God is a surrender to the higher consciousness, where all of our true self, our true guidance comes from the higher self. And because we're so stuck, like the yoga philosophy teaches us, on the reality coming in through our senses, we're bringing in all of this information through our senses. We're making a model of reality from it. We cling to it as if it's permanent, and that's the road to suffering and self-destruction. So to surrender to the unknown and not have any sureties is fearful. And yet, if we want to make progress on the spiritual path, that's exactly what we have to do.
So you mentioned God, and we talked about Ram Dass and his guru, Neem Karoli Baba.
Yeah.
He says he taught Ram Dass to send the message to love everyone, serve everyone, and to remember God. What have you learned about God? What does that mean to you?
God is as much a state of mind. When you talk about Brahma, the infinite in the Vedas, it is a cosmic consciousness, shall we say? It's gone by so many words and names. And so if you just simplify it and say the God of your understanding, separate from religion, as being a state of mind. Yoga, when all is said and done, yoga is a state of mind. It's what you practice to surpass the ego and be in the superconscious. And it's personal and it's sacred, and it's only gotten through practice. So the surrender part is getting out of your own way so that you can show up in that stillness and quietness. I always talk about stillness and quietness being the prerequisite to have that meditative experience, and that the rest just unfolds naturally and exactly as Patanjali said it would, through following his recipe. So God turns people off. The word God turns some people off. So I just say the God of your understanding, or your higher self, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I found that as well, that the word God does turn people off because of their experience with religion in the past. But I truly believe that yoga, the philosophies of yoga, the practice of yoga, the meditation, could complement other people's religion. I don't think
absolutely.
yoga...
Absolutely. And I've had an Anglican minister take my training. I've had a rabbi take my training to be yoga teachers and take it into their fold. And it complements any faith expression. It's inclusive. And it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy, it's a way of living that helps you access the full spectrum of the mind, not just the day-to-day waking, if you want to call it waking consciousness, but the entire realm of possibilities that's available to us when we learn how to meditate and access the superconsciousness. So it's anybody that is advocating a certain religion can benefit greatly by bringing the yoga practice into it. Meditation and prayer are different sides of the same coin, and it's complementary.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, because, and I'm sure it was even more like this in the past, a lot of religions said like no to yoga, like for example in schools, because they say it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, satanic or the devil's work. So what are
Yes, I've
your...
had a lot of that, especially in the early years. I had a lot of that resistance. Well, a yoga teacher is an educator in the West. It's ingrained in the Indian culture into their very, very being. But for Westerners, we are educators, still educating people on what yoga is. It's a science, it's a philosophy, it's an art, all of those things. And so when I've had people that refuse to close their eyes in a meditation because they think I'm going to take them into a trance or something. I know right away who they are. And then I'll just gently tell them that this is, it's the same as prayer. I'm talking to the same God you are. It's just semantics. And take every opportunity like that to educate people what yoga really is.
How would you tell a householder, just a general householder, what yoga is, if they like that is unaware?
Well, I always like to learn a bit more about the person first. If I'm going to teach yoga or I've been invited to, I want to know about them. What is your motivation for yoga? Do you want to get a flatter core, firmer tummy? Do you want to get off the sleeping pills? Do you have an addiction issue? So I ask a few key questions respectfully, and then I try to get a bit of a profile of the person, and then that determines what kind of prescription for yoga I'm going to give them. Because as you know, yoga is very broad, and I might just go off on some little, I think they need this, and give them something that they have no intention of practicing, and it turns them off. So I like to tailor make it or custom make whatever yoga prescription I give people to that person that I'm communicating with and having a consultation with, and then I know they're more likely to follow it and get the benefits.
Mm-hmm. Through your experience and through your many years of teaching, what type of people make the best students?
The best yoga teachers?
Students. And I guess
Oh,
the
the
best yoga
students,
teachers is
the
students.
trainees. I thought you meant trainees. Who makes the best teacher trainee that's come to me? The best students are the ones that are motivated, and the ones that are motivated are the ones that have health challenges, serious health challenges, autoimmune disorders, cancer diagnosis, loss of a loved one, addictions, and they don't necessarily say right up front that that's why they're coming to a yoga class. I've had people come to me a few years later and say, just want you to know, these yoga classes saved my life. I had an alcohol problem, or I had a substance addiction, or whatever, and yoga has been part of my recovery, and I just want to thank you. Sometimes I had no idea. That's why you have to, as a teacher, when you enter the studio, into the room you're teaching, have such a respect and set a sacred space up for them to have that healing.
It's interesting. I used to think that yoga saved my life as well. I started my yoga journey with Bikram yoga as an athlete, a lifelong
Right.
athlete. That really it appealed to me because of just like the physical challenge and the mental challenge of that practice. But one thing that I did not like about that practice is Bikram Chandra, he says the yoga is saved you. It's these 26 postures, and it didn't take until a few years later on my yoga journey. I was at a 200-hour training at the Nocera Yoga Institute of Costa Rica, and I was telling Don Stapleton, one of my teachers there, that how Bikram yoga saved me, and then he said, Bikram yoga didn't save you, you saved you. And it was like a light bulb in my head. And
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was me, because it was me that showed up at that studio day after day. It was me that stayed in the poses, that just didn't walk out of the room,
That's
that kept
right.
on going back, that
Yeah.
changed. And if it wasn't for like Bikram yoga, I would have found a different type of yoga, or I would have found, I don't know, something else. I would have found art or painting or poetry. But there's a light within me, a spirit within me that would refuse to let that ember die, and it would soak
Yeah.
it in one way or
Yeah.
another. So,
There was a willingness in you to pursue something that you knew to be beneficial and to show up for it, to show up for your life in that way. And there's a couple of ways of looking at that. Yes, you did it for you. Yes, you were the initiator. Yes, you drew from your reservoir of will and were willing, as I said, to show up that way. The other side of that is Bikram was a rung on the ladder. Bikram was in service to you to make that possible. Yes, you could have found another yoga studio or teacher, but you didn't. It was Bikram at that time.
Yeah.
So despite all the scandals and everything and the way it ended, there, in my mind, it's always good to have some gratitude for the guru who showed up in the guise that they did at that moment in your life. Always lots to be thankful for.
Yeah, no, I do. I'm thankful for every step along the journey, the highs and the lows, because it has all got me to my moment
Yes.
now. In my moment now,
Yes.
like I'm the best me that
Wow.
there's been, and I'm excited for
Yes.
what's ahead. And what's ahead is infinite now. It's just now, again and again
Oh,
and again.
yes. What you're doing is fabulous. The work that you're doing and the awareness that you're spreading and networking with people to educate them on the benefits of yoga. Because I think since COVID, a lot of it is fizzled away, and it needs to be reorganized and brought out. And again, education is key on what yoga
Education,
really is.
yes, education. I also feel community, and that's been like the last piece of the puzzle that I've been really trying to um, bring in. I think all growth is exponential with the proper community and the proper sangha around you. COVID was difficult for us all, but also a blessing in the way it got us to connect. And I was able to start my podcast during this time and connect with yoga teachers from around the world, and including you, talking to them, taking classes with them. I practiced with Ryan Lear in his one yoga community all through COVID, and
Fantastic.
stayed inspired in that way. And then that kind of taught me about the importance of community. And then I found my community at the Yoga Center of Winnipeg, where we have like a
Yes. Lucky
regular
you.
sangha. Yeah, and practicing with students who've been practicing and teaching for decades.
Yes.
And it's a real
Quality
honor.
teachers.
Quality teachers and students that have been dedicated. And I think the best teachers as well. The best teachers are the best students.
Yes.
Senior,
Yes.
senior,
Yes.
senior learners.
And it's the students that certify you. If the students keep coming back, they certify you. So you can get all the certifications you want out there, but if you don't have students coming.
Yeah. How do you ensure that you keep students coming? So how does that look like for you?
Well, there's a bit of handing it over to a higher power and just trusting who shows up, and the right people always seem to show up. Just offer a class. When I first opened my yoga studio in 1996, I was the first studio in Calgary. And my first class, guess how many people showed up?
One?
One. I was terrified after I put all this money in. I'd fashioned the studio after the one in Santa Monica. I didn't spare any expense, and one person showed up. And I thought, well, and I often use that as an example with my students. You start with one, we'll become 3, we'll become 5, we'll become 10, and it grows from there. So I put out just as much teaching one student as I do a group of 20. So you just, if your heart is in it, and you're there not just for you to have your practice, but to be in service to that person on the mat in front of you, you'll always have students.
And then how does those students become community? What were your secrets to creating the community you did at your yoga studio?
Well, we live in an
Calgary?
age right now in Canada where people are taking the teacher training program as a personal development course to get skills, whether they're social workers or psychologists or addiction counselors or whatever. They want the yoga to develop for themselves personally and then take it back to their workplace. And I see that as a really good trend. I see that as having yoga filter into every workplace environment because of the people that are taking it forward that way. So that's going to continue. There'll always be students until maybe we'll be like India one day and it'll just be part of our culture in a deep way. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
What would be your ideal vision for yoga in Canada?
I would like to see the teacher training programs offer more of the philosophy and meditation. I don't call yoga teachers that don't meditate yoga teachers. I call them asana teachers. And I don't mean that to be derogatory. I mean it as a way to motivate teachers. If you're not meditating, You're not following the 8 limbs of yoga. If you're not following the 8 limbs, then you're not a fully fledged yoga teacher. So I think the dynamic shift happens at a personal level and at a community level when you embrace meditation. And people aren't lined up for meditation. The dropout rate is really high with meditation because there's not enough teachers. So teachers will take the 200-hour course and then they don't go the extra mile, commit to a lineage and have a daily practice of meditation in whatever style you choose to, and so on. And I don't think we're going to have a change in North America culturally and until that happens, until we look at it from that angle.
And the first way to create change is be the change yourself. So it's for everyone listening that's a teacher or not, is to meditate yourself, and that's what I do regularly. And I also be sure to include meditation at the end of every one of my classes. We end practice with a meditation, just to show people like you do have this 1 minute just to sit here and meditate, and just to allow them to sit and just be.
Yes,
give them
practice
permission.
Stillness and silence is the hardest thing for Westerners. Stillness and silence. Asana until the agitation settles down. The physical agitation that we carry with us in our body, it'll settle down through asana. Asana means seated. Asana means to be seated in your lotus or whatever so that you don't fall over. And then the practice of yoga begins, which is the pranayama to quiet the nervous system, which is looking at the vrittas, the disturbances, as a mindfulness. But that's still only part of it. To practice mindfulness is not samadhi. To practice mindfulness is just noticing the thoughts. That's great. It's part of the process, but it's not the end game. So I think there needs to be more meditation teachers. There needs to be as many meditation teachers as there are yoga teachers out there right now. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? Then we'd have a substantial cultural change, I think.
So these 8 limbs, they all lead up to samadhi, or deep absorption. How would you describe that limb?
Samadhi?
Yeah.
So dharana, concentration, dhyana, the stream of consciousness, and then samadhi, pure bliss. It's not that hard to achieve if you're willing to put 10, 20 years of your life into it. In other words, it's a pure nothingness. Deepak Chopra calls it the space between your thoughts is where pure consciousness is. And there is absolutely nothing there except a feeling of deep, deep contentment. And when you meditate, you get just a taste of it, almost like flashes, glimpses, enough to verify that it's real and to keep you coming back for more. And then your goal, if I could use that word, is all about how do I sustain this as a state of mind after I'm off my meditation cushion and take it into everyday life. So then it becomes samadhi is the norm and our ego-driven life isn't. It becomes a complete reversal.
How have you learned to make samadhi the norm?
By practicing. Returning to, daily life is still the reality model that we follow. Even though quantum physics tells us we're just occupying space and who I was just a nanosecond ago is no longer. So when you sit to practice and occupy the infinite space, which has no sensory input whatsoever, and you lose sense of time and space and all of that, you just want to be there. Like Ram Dass would say, who wants to come back? Ram Dass would say, maybe I'll come back just long enough to, go to the toilet or whatever. He was always so funny. So that is when real change and real yoga starts to happen.
And in that real yoga, what part does love play into it? What is that love?
There's no differentiation. Samadhi is love, love is samadhi. If you read the writings of all the many swamis that have left us so much literature, the message is pretty much the same. I mean, I've listened to Satchidananda and Muktananda and all the Anandas. The message is the same. It's pure bliss, it's love, there's no beginning, there's no end, it flows, there's no striving, there's no wanting, there's no criticism, there's none of the vrittas, the chattering of the mind. It's just pure everything is okay, and it seems natural and normal. And it's just like Swami Veda says, it's the nectar. It's the sweet nectar that you always want to return to.
Would you say it's an embodiment? It's a like love.
Samadhi is an embodiment.
Yeah,
I would
like
look at the
frequency.
physical. Frequency, yes, that would be more descriptive. Yeah, they refer to it as a notion of bliss that we're swimming in, but we're in physical form and we're confined to this body, physical matter, and the sensory input, which is making sense of other physical matter. It has been likened to a big room that's full of furniture, right? The ego and the sensory input is the furniture. And when you remove the furniture, there's a spaciousness and an enlargement of your existence.
And service has been such a big piece of this journey for you. You serve others through your education, through teaching other teachers, through teaching students, through your book, through your presence in the spaces you occupy, I'm sure, including this conversation. How does one find how they serve? Not everyone knows how to be of service. How does one find how they can best serve?
Pay attention. Everybody around you is in need. Listening is a big one. Just listening, not making it about you. What's happening in this person's life? What are they in need of? How can I lend a helping hand? How can I, one of my affirmations in the morning when I go for my walk is, how can I make a difference in someone's life today? And how can I recognize it when it's in front of me? And it usually is nonstop. It's in your face all the time. The difference is we didn't know it because we weren't paying attention. And we're so absorbed in our own drama and our own, again, wants and needs of the physical body. I feel that I'm very privileged and I have so many blessings. And as you get older, you think about, all my needs are met. But we live in a world where somebody else needs a hand up. And altruism is a very strong aspect of the yoga path. And being altruistic to one's neighbor, one's friend, and seeing what you can do for them is huge. There's a lot of selfishness out there right now in the world, coming after COVID and isolation and self-protectiveness and the ego armoring itself the way it does. So to move from selfish to selflessness means making it about somebody else.
In order to serve others, we also have to just make sure our own personal health, mental, emotional, spiritual, is in order. How do you keep those in order? Like, what are your primary self-care foundations that you use to stay strong?
Interesting you would say that, because at the very top of I have this pyramid, and the very top there is health. So that's taking the time to cook pure food, organic food filled with prana, and my practice. And that the more you practice, the more energy you have. And the more you practice, the more trust you have. And when you can draw from those two things, it just frees up all of this energy. And people say to me, how do you do all the things that you do? And I said, well, I practice. And I learned that from my teachers, because I'd see, Father Joe Pereira is 82 years old. He's traveling to Poland and UK and Greek islands and doing his back bends and, teaching 30-year-olds how to do what he does, and they can't. And I said, I know it works. So the more you practice, the more you have to draw from.
So what does your practice look like these days? How has it evolved?
I usually get on the mat and I feel what I need to do, and I'm guided that way. But I do Urdhva Dhanurasana, back bend, twice for 1 minute. I do headstand, Shirshasana, 3 minutes to 5 minutes. And I'll do the shoulder stand series, Sarvangasana series, for 20 minutes. A lot of these I learned from B.K.S. Iyengar and Norman Showman, who you should interview, by the way, Sanskrit scholar. I'll tell you more about him.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And, one little tip for people who are Iyengar teachers, as long as I have been, is that it's a little wearing on the hips as you get older. Some Iyengar teachers have had hip replacements. So you can substitute some strengthening poses instead, and get on the floor and do strengthening poses that way. But I find the back bends and the inverts primary for health because of the organic body. So those are things that should never be neglected.
And do you use those with props, like chairs and bolsters and blankets?
I use the blocks for back bend or Urdhva I use the blocks, nothing for headstand, and I use the strap for shoulder stand with blankets, just the way B.K.S teaches it.
Yeah, like I've been using more and more props in my personal practice, and as I teach, I really try to recommend people using props and blocks. I feel like a lot of the yoga students, especially as they begin, they see props kind of as a weakness, like they don't want to use props. And I think like I'm trying to help people see that they're not only props, they're more like tools, and they're there to help benefit us and they help us to find ease into our posture.
They were invented by Iyengar. They call him the furniture yogi. He was the first one to come along and say, where there's space between the body and the floor and too much efforting, you put a prop. So he fashioned bolsters and blocks and all of those things. They're useful. They're not mandatory. There comes a time in your practice where you can let go of the props. I tell my trainees, don't be codependent on the prop. How come you're still using that strap 4 years later? So there is a time to let go of the props as needed, and then as you get older and the body needs to have more balance and firmness, you bring the props back again. So if you keep practicing, your body tells you what you need.
And what have been the keys to longevity in your practice?
Keys to longevity, you mean? Well, I just follow the syllabus, the Iyengar syllabus, because it's brilliant. The Iyengar syllabus, I give my trainees a list of 60 poses from the Iyengar syllabus, and I say, if you know those 60 poses and the hundreds of derivatives, modifications of them, you're well equipped as a yoga teacher, and that takes 2 or 3 years to learn that. But those 60 poses in classical yoga asana, not fusions, but classical yoga moves, you can't go wrong with that.
But you've never had to deal with injuries or...
Oh, yes. With the injury, you take the Iyengar classical pose and you modify it for the injury. So you meet the person at their level. That's what he did. He customized the poses. Right from the most demanding, rigorous standing poses to be on the bolster with an eye tension bandage because you're recovering from a car accident or whatever, and everything in between. Everything in between is modification to meet that student at their level for quicker healing.
Yeah, it's interesting. From my studies, it seems like the best type of yoga instruction would be one-on-one. Like a teacher working directly with their student to give them specific cues and propping and advice.
For ailments and injuries, yes. A private is definitely the best. If you have good health and you're in with a group, sometimes there's a dynamic energy that comes from the group. But for people who are in recovery from X, Y, and Z, yes, a personal consultation is the way to go.
So we talked about a few about Neem Karoli's sayings. We talked about love. We talked about service. We talked about God.
Yeah.
His last piece to that is, and tell the truth. What does that mean to you? What is most true for you?
Any of us can only tell the truth as we know it in the moment. The mind hides so much away and distorts reality to make it more palatable. And that's just the human condition. That's just what we do. The mind is very complex. So what might be true for me in the moment is only what my conscious mind can access. There's so much at the subconscious level that we don't access. So we can be as true to ourselves as we can in that moment. But to really expand on that and get more, satya, truthfulness, you need to do work. You need to do the work. you need to do journaling, you need to do inner child, you need to do Patanjali sutras, you need to do meditation. All of that lends itself to a more evolved human being. So, and it becomes more true. Things reveal itself to us through the practice, and it becomes more true. So.
Yeah. Journaling and writing has been a big tool on my journey. How has journaling and writing shaped your path?
I don't do so much journaling anymore, but way back when I studied with Swami Radha, who founded Yashoda Ashram, she did a lot of journaling. And it was a very good way, almost like automatic writing, for the subconscious to free flow and reveal itself to you, what you were hanging on to in the way of ego armor or restrictions or distortions that might not be your truth anymore. What Piero Ferrucci said, hanging on to your ticket long after you got off the bus. And then the journaling helps free that, and then you can read it and make new choices on whether it serves you in your life now or not. So journaling is a good tool.
Mm-hmm. And then your writing, this is your first book.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write that book, and what's the next project?
I like listening to people, and the older women and older men, the wisdom that they carry, is sometimes you have to pull it out of them. People don't talk about themselves so easily. But I just got on a roll as I started to hear more about these stories, especially from World War II in Holland and in Germany. And then when I went across Canada and interviewed people, I would ask them, do you know who was before you? And they would say, oh, you should phone so-and-so. So then I'd get them and I'd say, well, who was before you? And it was like peeling away the layer of an onion until I got to the original people who got on a ship and brought it to Canada. And as I said, they all had something really valuable to say when you pull it out of them. As you're interviewing, and not that I'm a professional interviewer or anything, but I just learned that if you asked a few key questions and were a little probing with people, some amazing things came out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what's next? Do you have another
I would like to do a
in mind?
documentary on early yoga in Canada. Ryan Lear and I are talking about that. I think a documentary to reach some of these people before they die is a good idea, because then it's gone, isn't it? You haven't got the straight from the horse's mouth like we have the opportunity to do now. So, and I've got Poland and Ukraine, so we'll see what happens after that. Looking for some teachers who might want to go with me. Right now I only have one interested, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure more will unveil itself.
We'll see. We'll see.
When are you headed there?
May 25th.
Okay. I have a final two questions that I ask every guest, and we're at this point now. My first question: through all the highs and lows that is this hero's journey, that is your life story, what has been the greatest life lesson you've learned on your path that you feel called in this moment to share with us now?
Trust the teachings. Often the teacher that you have is caught in scandal or tainted. The teacher may be tainted, the teachings never are. The teachings have stood for a few thousand years now, and they are fantastic and brilliant and flawless and a great guide, a great recipe for living, and have no end of things to discover when you delve into them. So I would say trust the teachings, explore the teachings, which are really well delivered by Western writers like Ram Dass, a little bit more difficult when you get into the Indian writing, and see how it's so applicable to today as it was back then.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What would be the teachings you'd most recommend the listeners or your students or teachers?
I would recommend the Bhagavad Gita written by Stephen Mitchell is a really good one to dig into. I would recommend the Yamas and Niyamas. I think it's Deborah Adelson. Brilliant. Yeah. I would recommend any of Stephen Levine's work. The Power of Now, fantastic. If you can read and understand, really get nitty-gritty of the Power of Now, you've got Patanjali stuff, pretty much. So those would be some good things to start with.
Okay, thank you. And my final question, we've examined your past, we've examined your present. Let's fast forward a bit into the future. And let's go alongside an 85-year-old Valery Petrich. Who is that 85-year-old woman? Where are you? Who are you surrounded by? And what is the legacy you've left in your 85 years?
I'll be teaching. I'll be teaching until my last breath. And I will support and encourage younger people who want to study with me if I'm honored enough to have that. And no more war. This war stuff has to stop. It's just not okay what's going on with the genocide and the power play. It's just not okay. And I think that, as Swami Rama says, that if you can cultivate peace within yourself, it makes a huge contribution to the world. So peace begins with us. And that's practice, because we all have our own conflicts and our own impulsive behavior and our own attitudes and beliefs that keep our practice impure. And that's okay, because it's just part of the human condition. But I really, at 85, I'd like to see more peace in the world, because right now it's quite disturbing to see.
So what do we do with the darkness that creates this instability in our worlds and in our teachers? You talked about trust the teachings, not the teachers, because we're seeing more and more like there's darkness in these teachers, and there's all these scandals coming in play.
Well, I just see them, they're human beings. They took a human life form, they came to teach. As soon as we take a human form, we're tainted, we're restricted by cause and effect. Rama Vernon, one of my most esteemed teachers, used to say there's a saint in every sinner and a sinner in every saint. So when you adopt that philosophy, it's like you can, I don't know if I want to use the word forgive, you can allow for the fact that teachers that we put on a pedestal let us down. I don't have to name any names here. Anybody in the yoga world knows who those people are.
Yeah.
But you pull the good, you separate the wheat from the chaff, and you pull the teachings that well-intentioned individual was trying to take forward, even though they succumbed to power or whatever it was.
Yeah, and then so once we practice that on individuals, how do we extend that to nations?
Good question. Very good question. Yeah.
Because that's where we're at now.
Where we are now in the world is we feel helpless that we can alter. The power of the world is in the hand of 2 or 3 individuals right now. And they have a very secure hold on power today, as of today. And the Maharishi, Transcendental Meditation, he said if you could get 5% of the world's population meditating, it shifts the unity consciousness towards peace. That's why he used to have these thousands of people gather for his meditations, was to shift that. And that is the yoga premise. That's not one man's premise. That's in the scriptures. So if we could get enough people meditating and focusing on peace, that's one way. It doesn't mean don't arm and fight the good fight like Arjuna in the Gita. It doesn't mean we don't do that. We do. We go to Ukraine and we use the missiles and drones. But it also means that every time we're on our mat meditating and practicing samadhi, the drops in the ocean will change the entire ocean, is what the yoga teachings tell us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. It's been such an honor and a privilege to talk with you, Valery, and to get to hear your story and all these wonderful sharings.
Thank you.
For people wanting to connect with you and to learn with you, how can they find you? You have your Instagram at valery.petrich. They could find you at the yogastudiocollege.com.
Yes. Yogastudiocollege.com is good because it's got my email there and my phone number and whatever else is needed there. And let's you and I talk separately after this podcast, because I have a couple of things to share with you about other people that you might find interesting and so on. Yeah. Thank you very much. Namaste. God bless. Bye-bye for now.